Mr. Eric. Today is all about how God is faithful. God loves us so much and He is on our side. He is loyal to us. He wants us to choose a relationship with Him that lasts forever. And like any relationship we have, it's possible we'll come up against some tough obstacles. That reminds me of the Israelites. We've been taking a look at how God's first chosen people came under a lot of high-pressure situations as they learned how God expected them to live their lives. Well, let's check out this video to get caught up.
God's chosen people, the Israelites, were slaves in Egypt for over 400 years. Then God made a way for them to be freed. Moses led them out into the wilderness where God parted the Red Sea and they walked through on dry land. The current generations of Israelites had only ever known life in Egypt, where even though they were slaves, they had what they needed to survive. So, wandering around the desert was hard, really hard. But God showed them that He loved them and would always take care of them. He gave them food when they asked for food, water when they asked for water. He protected them from their enemies and even gave them the 10 Commandments so they would know how to live their lives serving the one true God instead of the false gods of Egypt. God was leading the Israelites to a land He had promised them, but when they arrived, they became afraid of the people that lived there. Almost all the Israelites did not have faith in God's plan. They did not trust that God had everything under control. So God caused them to wander in the desert for 40 more years.
Okay, so one thing we need to understand is at this point in the true story, the older generation of Israelites who had escaped from Egypt after the 10 plagues had died. All their children were now part of a new generation of Israelites. Also, Moses was old and about to die, and he was also not allowed to enter into the promised land. So the people needed a new leader. God called on Joshua to become that new leader. And do you know what obstacle the Israelites came up against not long after Joshua led them in crossing the Jordan River and entering the promised land? In a word, Jericho.
Welcome to Jericho Eyewitness News. I'm Cliff Rogers. This just in, a new military strategy or just a bunch of crazies? Let's go live to Jericho with our reporter in the field, Eileen Douglas. Eileen?
Thanks, Cliff. That is the question of the day. Could the Israelite army be successful in knocking down the walls of Jericho by simply marching around the city? Or have they all lost their minds? Let's take a look at the scene.
Ha! Great strategy, guys. What are you gonna do? Just keep walking around and make us dizzy? What are you trying to prove? Ha! That's a great idea. What are you gonna do? Come up to our huge front gates and do like a little fancy dancy dance? Like, ooh.
Ignore them, men. Remember, you shall not shout or make your voice heard. Neither shall you let any word go out of your mouth until the day I say shout, then you shall shout.
This is the leader of the Israelites, Joshua. Joshua, could we have a word?
Keep marching, men. I'll be right back.
Joshua, I'm Eileen Douglas with Jericho Eyewitness News. Could you please fill us in on exactly what's happening here?
Eileen, I'm sure what we're doing may look a little weird, but God came to me and told me that we should take this land, which means we need to destroy every city, including Jericho. We've been marching around these walls for 7 days, and a lot of my men think what we are doing is a little ridiculous, but I keep explaining to them how great and how faithful our God is. I know God is with us. In fact, I was standing near Jericho, and the commander of God's army came to me and spoke to me and said that the land that I was standing on was holy. It was an amazing worship experience. And it was He who gave me this battle plan. I know my God is faithful, and we need to obey Him, so I choose to obey Him. Excuse me, I better get back to my men.
You heard it here first, folks. Joshua's army has been marching around this wall for 7 days, hoping to bring down the walls of Jericho. Looks like there's some more action on top of the wall. Let's see what all the commotion is about.
7 days you guys been walking around. I bet you guys are real hungry. This watermelon sure is delicious.
As you can see, the situation here is really heating up. Uh-oh. Sounds like something's about to happen. Let's take a look.
Ooh, yeah! Yeah! Hey guys, I got an idea. How about we start a band? We can go around with some maracas and some sombreros. You guys would be superb trumpeters. And we can start a little mariachi band! Ooh, yeah! Yeah, because obviously being an army isn't working out for you guys. You know, with your brilliant strategies and all. You know, you should trade in your swords for some more instruments. Yeah!
Now's the time for God to display His power. Come on, man, blow your trumpets and shout. God has given you this city.
Bro? Is this wall starting to shake? Oh no. That's it. I'm out of here.
Incredible! The walls are falling and the Israelite army is rushing into the city. This seemingly crazy tactic, given to this army by the God of Israel, has worked against all odds. Since God is always faithful, I'm going to work hard at doing a better job of obeying Him. You've been watching Jericho Eyewitness News. I'm Eileen Douglas, reporting.
Okay, so of course there were no TV news stations around way back when Joshua and the Israelite army conquered Jericho with God's power. And we have no idea what the soldiers of Jericho would have said or eaten, but the fact that the big strong walls of Jericho came crashing down after Joshua and the Israelites obeyed God's instructions is completely true. And it's true because God is faithful. Would you say that bottom line with me? God is faithful. Life is full of pressures, things that make life difficult, and the Israelites felt pressure too. They were afraid to enter the promised land at first. Then, once they moved in, they felt the pressure of taking over the land from the people who lived there. But God had promised it to them, and He had a plan to make it happen. For Jericho, God's plan included having the Israelite army march around the city once a day for 6 days, and then 7 more times on the 7th day. When they finished marching around the walls the final time, the priests blew their trumpets and the people shouted, "Ah!" and the walls of the city came crashing down. They conquered Jericho not because they had incredible marching skills or really loud voices, but because they chose to trust and obey God. And He is faithful to do exactly what He says He will do. God is faithful all the time. He'll never let us down, even when we come up against walls or the obstacles and tough situations that seem too difficult to get past in our own lives. In fact, in Deuteronomy 31:6, Moses said this to the Israelites: "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." That means that God is faithful to His people. He knows that sometimes we'll come up against giant walls or obstacles in our lives, and He has a plan for how to help us get through them. So, is what Moses said only true for the Israelites? No way! Well, then who else is this truth for? That's right. It's for us. When you choose to make Jesus the leader and forgiver of your life, you become part of God's family, and you can trust that God will always be with you. God's plan for the Israelites was to have victory at Jericho, but Joshua and his army had a choice. They had to choose whether or not to do the crazy marching around the walls and shouting thing that God said to do, or to do it their own way. I'm thankful that Joshua was such a good leader who followed God, and that the army chose to obey God by obeying the leader God had given them. Even though the Israelites weren't perfect, this true story is a really good example of what it looks like to trust that God is faithful and to obey God no matter what. Our memory verse reminds us that we will face difficult things in our lives, but if we trust the unlimited power of God, He can keep those tough things from destroying us. So let's say it together. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. That's 2 Corinthians 4:8. Sometimes we may not follow through on something we said we'd do. But God always does what he says he will do. And do you know why? Yes, because God is faithful. Say that bottom line with me again. God is faithful. Thanks. I'll see you next time.